Hello students, welcome back to biology classes. Today we will discuss on very interesting topic that is used in human genetics, and it is pedigree analysis. For NEET exam, one question based on pedigree analysis is usually asked. So therefore this topic is very important. We will also learn in this topic what are the simple rules by which we can identify any pedigree chart that is given to us. The analysis of inheritance pattern with respect to the traits in human began soon after the rediscovery of Mendel's experiment. But this study on human genetics is much more difficult than that of plants and animals because of two reasons. First, that control crosses cannot be performed as it was done in Mendelian experiments or the experiments that were carried out by T.H. Morgan, wherein cross hybridization could be carried out at ease. The second reason is the progeny produced is very small and takes longer time. So to learn about human genetics, the study of the family history about inheritance of a particular trait provided the clue. Such analysis of the traits in a several generation of a family, we can see here there are 3 generations. So likewise, several generations could be studied in a particular family, and that is what called as pedigree analysis, where the particular trait is represented in the family tree over generation. So we can define pedigree analysis that it is the diagrammatic record of inheritance of a particular trait or traits over 2 or more generations in family tree, or a record of occurrence of a trait in several generations of a human family. We can easily prepare this pedigree chart by using certain symbols. So we will see some important symbols that are usually taken to prepare a pedigree chart. Square denotes the male, circle denotes the female. A solid or the shaded symbols, male, female, or any other individual whose sex is not specified, represent the individuals that are supposed to be studied with respect to that particular trait. It may be any particular characteristic or a disease which we are supposed to study. So those symbols will be shaded. 1. The mating is shown by a horizontal line, we can see here, that connects the male symbol with that of female symbol. So these indicate the parental generation. The offspring symbols, we can see here, these are the offsprings. So these symbols are arranged from left to right, indicating the order of birth, and are connected by this horizontal line below the parents, and this line is connected to the parent or marriage line by a vertical line. Okay, so open or clear symbols indicate that there is the absence of the trait. Okay, that means they are the normal individual, whereas the individuals, male or females, that are shaded indicates that these are the traits that are supposed to be studied or they are affected one. So pedigree analysis provide a strong tool to trace the inheritance. So here we can determine the genotypes or phenotypes. We can identify and predict how a trait will be passed from one generation to another. We can also find out whether the trait is dominant or recessive. It also provides the variable information based on the genetic makeup, wherein a possible genotype of a person for that particular trait can be identified. It also helps the genetic counselor to advise the couples who all are worried of the possibility of having any genetically defect in their children, when it is known that such defect is running in their family. And therefore it is also used in medical research so that the researchers can guide the people, and accordingly the treatment for a particular disease can be rectified. So, pedigree analysis play a vital role in order to understand the inheritance pattern for a particular trait in human. Now we know that genes represent a particular characteristic or a trait, and these genes are present on the DNA, and DNA is present in the chromosome. So we already know that in our cells there are two types of chromosomes, that is autosomal and sex chromosomes, right? So when we speak about autosomes or sex chromosome, so definitely when we are studying based on the traits, we will see that some of the traits are autosomal linked since they are present on the autosomes, and some of them will be sex linked since these traits are present on the sex chromosome. So we will remember that if we are studying any autosomal linked disease, we will take an alphabet as A. Okay? And when we are studying the trait or disease which is related to sex linked, then the females will be denoted as XX and males will be denoted as X and Y. Autosomal linked trait or disease can be dominant or recessive, right? So if it is dominant, there can be homozygous alleles or heterozygous alleles. So definitely we have to write capital A or capital A, small a. And if it is recessive, then we have to write down as small a for autosomal linked disease or trait. Whereas sex linked diseases, again they can be dominant or recessive one. Since here sex chromosomes are involved, so if the trait is present on the X chromosome, then we can call this disease or trait as X-linked diseases or trait. Whereas if any defect is present on Y chromosome, it will be called as Y-linked diseases. Okay? Now, if sex-linked diseases or trait are dominant one, then what we have to note? In females, there are two X chromosomes, right? So if one of the X chromosome has that defect, okay, or a trait which we are supposed to study. So I have denoted it as a small dot, indicating that the trait is present on this X chromosome. Okay. So here we can see the females are heterozygous. Okay. But since it is the dominant one, the females will be affected here. Also, we see if that same trait is present on both the X chromosome, again females will be affected. So whether female is homozygous or heterozygous for that trait, the females will be affected since the gene is the dominant one. Now males have two types of chromosome. We know that it is called as heterogamety. So there is one X chromosome and there is one Y chromosome here. Okay. So one copy of X chromosome is received by the female parent, right? So during the gamete formation. So even if there is one X with the defect or with the trait, the males will be affected here. Okay. So these males will be affected. If the genes are recessive, then what will happen? Here we will see that if on one X chromosome the trait is present, then the females are called as carrier of that trait or disease. So here the females are absolutely normal and they will be asymptomatic. They won't show any symptoms related to that particular trait or disease. Okay. So we should remember in recessive, the heterozygous female wherein only one X chromosome has the trait is the carrier of the disease and this female will be absolutely normal. Whereas when the trait is present on both the X chromosome, then the females are affected here. Okay. In males, again since only one X chromosome is there with the trait, so males will be affected. So in both the cases, the males, whether it is dominant or recessive, males are affected if the trait is present on the X chromosome. So these are the important tips which we should keep in mind when we are learning about pedigree analysis. So for the exam, if such type of pedigree charts are shown, so how to identify that a particular chart is autosomal or sex-linked? If it is autosomal, then whether it is dominant or recessive, even for the sex-linked diseases, right? And if it is dominant, whether it is homozygous or heterozygous. And if it is sex-linked recessive, wherein the females are carrier, how to identify these females as they are carrier, okay, since they won't show any symptoms, right? So they will be normal. So whether they are homozygous or heterozygous, it is very difficult to identify. But based on this pedigree, we have to follow certain rules wherein we can easily identify any of the chart and we can determine whether it is autosomal or sex-linked. So first one is autosomal dominant pedigree. So since it is dominant, it will be either homozygous or heterozygous. So capital A or capital A small a. So both the individuals will be affected here, whereas the recessive one will be normal. So here we can see the shaded ones are the dominant, wherein we are studying with respect to this particular trait. Some autosomal dominant diseases are Huntington disease and polycystic kidney disease. So first rule to identify this chart is the trait never skips a generation. So at least one member in all the generation will have this disease. So we have to keep this first point in our mind. Second, both the affected parents can have normal offspring. We can see here a normal offspring without the disease or trait, provided both the parents should be heterozygous, that is capital A, small a, then only the normal offsprings can be seen. So this is the second rule. Third, there is the equal frequency wherein both type of sexes can be having this disease. So it is not that more of the males will have the disease and less of the female. So there is the equal frequency here. Next, affected offspring should have an affected parent. Okay, we have seen here, if parents are affected, then affected offsprings can be seen. And last one is both sexes, male as well as female, transmit this particular trait. Okay, so such diseases can be transmitted by either male as well as the female. So if we see this cross, we can make out when the parents are heterozygous, then what happens? One of the offspring or 1/4 of the offspring will be normal here. Okay, so that only is indicated with respect to second rule. Okay, we will remember the first 3 rules here. Okay, first 3 rules we have to remember in order to identify this pedigree chart. Second one is autosomal recessive. So since if it is the recessive one, the small a will be the affected individuals that are darkened or shaded here in the chart, whereas the capital A small a or capital A are the normal one without shading. The diseases are cystic fibrosis and sickle cell anemia. So the first rule, the trait skips the generation. We can see here, it skips the generation. So anywhere, any of the generation, if there is the skipping of the trait, indicate that it is autosomal recessive. Second, normal parents can have affected offspring. We can again see here, normal parents, but provided parents should be heterozygous with capital A, small a. So then only we can get the offspring which is affected. And since here it is small a, that is affected here. Third, appear in the both sexes. So this disease will be seen in both male as well as female with equal frequency. Again, both the sexes will transmit the trait to their offspring. So here first 3 rules we have to remember. Okay. The third one is X-linked dominant. Again we'll recall, XX is the normal one, heterozygous female or homozygous having both the X chromosome, the trait is the affected female since it is the dominant. Okay. Then X with the trait and Y chromosome, the males are affected, whereas XY are the normal males. The diseases are vitamin D resistant rickets, Rett syndrome, then incontinentia pigmenti or Galt's syndrome. So first rule, 100% affected daughters from affected father. So this is the first clue which we should keep in our mind. So we can see here, it is from the affected father, all the daughters will be affected, will get that trait. Since it is dominant, it won't skip the generation. And if the females are affected here, okay, then both the males as well as female offsprings will have that trait. Again we can see here, these are the offsprings belonging to this mother. So if females are affected, both the son as well as the daughters will get that disease. We can see in this cross when female parent is affected. So here what is happening? Both the female as well as males are affected. Right? So here we can easily make out. We will see how all the females get affected because of male parent. So if you see here, male is having the defect on X chromosome and this is the dominant one. Okay. So what happens is the X chromosome, when fuses with the X chromosome of the female during the gamete formation, therefore we will see all the females will get that disease because the individual or females will have one X chromosome from the father and other X chromosome from the mother. Okay, whereas males won't show any disease here, right? Because Y chromosome is from father and X chromosome, that is normal, which is received from the mother. So we should remember these 3 rules to identify X-linked dominant pedigree. The 4th one is X-linked recessive one. So again we should remember here XX will be the normal, X, 1X with the trait is the carrier female and she is normal without any symptoms. XY are the normal males and X with the trait and Y are the affected males. The diseases are color blindness and hemophilia. Now this is opposite from that of X-linked dominant one. Here 100% males are affected due to affected mother. So we can see here from the mother all the male offsprings are having the trait. This trait skips the generation. We can see here, okay, it skips the generation. So this is the generation which skips. So we come to know it is the X-linked recessive one. Third, it is the trait passed from father to daughter and from mother to son. So here we can see from father to daughter and from daughter to son. And 4th one is affected females are due to affected father as well as mother. That means if a female is affected, it will be due to father. That means father has to be affected and also mother, who can be either carrier of the disease or she should have that disease. Here in the cross we can see that female parent is having the trait. It is the affected one. So when we do the cross, we see that all the males will have this disease, right? Whereas the females are the carrier of the disease. So therefore they won't show this trait. They will be normal. Even when mother is the carrier of the disease, we see that half of the males are having this disease. Right? We can see here half of the male are having the disease, other half of the males are normal when the mother is the carrier of the disease. And this happens because the males get X chromosome from the mother and Y from the father. And the females' offsprings will be affected only if male parent has the disease and mother should at least be the carrier of the disease. Then only females will be affected here. Okay. Similarly, when the female parent is having the trait on both the X chromosome and the male parent is also affected with the disease, that time the females are affected. Okay. So these are the rules which we should remember. There are Y-linked diseases too, and that too it is dominant one. Here only the males are affected, since we know that males have Y chromosome. Okay. It is passed from father to all son, definitely because of Y chromosome, and it does not skip the generation. So the diseases what we see here, which is with respect to Y-linked, it is porcupine man disease, hypertrichomes or webbed toes. There is also mitochondrial inheritance. One of the syndrome is Lee syndrome. Here the trait is inherited from only mother and not from the father. So all the children of a mother are at risk to be affected, or they are the carrier of this mitochondrial disease. So this mitochondrial disease is due to the mutation of the mitochondrial DNA, and it is often involved in the disorders with respect to neuromuscular system. So inside each cell there are several mitochondria. So based on how much mutation has been taken place, accordingly the trait will be expressed here. So therefore here two pedigree charts that are being shown based on the proportion of mitochondrial carrying mutation. So this is rare type of disorders which are seen in human. And as we know that Y in males is meant for maleness, right? But this Y chromosome also carries certain genes that are other than sex determination, such as the hypertrichomes, webbed toes, as we had discussed. So these are also very rare, that is seen in males. So following certain rules which we have discussed today, we can identify any of the chart, okay, that is given to us. So we will just revise once again and try to identify the chart that will be given. In this chart we can see that the disease is transferred from one generation to another, that is, it doesn't skip. Second clue is male as well as female frequency is equal here for the trait. And the third clue, we can see that the affected parents have a normal offspring. So this indicates it is autosomal dominant trait. This is also one more example of autosomal dominant trait. Next one, as we can see from this pedigree chart, that there is the generation which has been skipped here, right? First clue. Second clue, we can see that normal parents have affected offspring. Second clue, and there is equal frequency of male and females having the trait. So this is autosomal recessive trait. This is another example. So likewise a chart will be given to us and we have to identify based on those rules which we have discussed. In this chart we can see only the males are affected. So definitely it will be sex linked disease. So now we have to find out whether it is dominant or recessive one. Okay. And also we have to know that it is X linked and not Y linked. So since here the mother must be the carrier of the disease, definitely it will be what? It will be X linked recessive disease. Right? This is another example we can see here. When mother is affected, all the males will get the disease, right? Here in this chart we can see male parent is affected and all daughters belonging to that parent is having the disease. Another clue which we can see here, that female parent who is affected will have male as well as females receiving that trait. So this indicate it is X-linked dominant trait. This is also another example of X-linked dominant pedigree. So this is about the rules which we should remember. Some common mistake or misconceptions that are done by most of the people. The first one is the presence of many affected individual in a family does not always means that the trait is dominant. We usually think that dominant trait are the one which are seen in most of the individuals in a family, but it is not so. When we are taking human population under consideration, then only we can say which the trait is dominant and which one is recessive. Okay, whereas in family we cannot specify that the trait which is occurring in more number of individuals doesn't mean it will be the dominant one. The second misconception is that you may not always be able to determine the genotype, because we know that if it is autosomal dominant, it can be heterozygous or homozygous, right? So we are not able to identify or determine the genotype of an individual just based on the pedigree. We have to solve or make a cross in order to identify, and that too we should have the record of all the generation. So this is all about today's topic. In next video we will see how we can solve and find out the genotypes in a particular pedigree chart which is given to us. Thank you.